be with us live. And he's got a bunch of weird questions, and I intentionally have not read them yet because I like to be surprised by the weirdness. This hour, Rose Sweet is with us. And you can probably hear in my voice the joy that Rose Sweet is here. We're going to talk about do-it-yourself marriage preparation. Rose, of course, is a life coach herself and an expert on divorce and annulments for Catholics and marriage in general, and also just a really cool cat. Hi, Rose.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
It's always so good when you're here. It's the only time that we have to kick half the women in the apostolate out of the studio before we do the show.
Why?
Because everybody comes to visit you. We don't.
Oh.
Everybody wants to. Oh, Rose is here. It's
well, we have fun here, don't we?
I do. I have fun when you're around. Yeah. Did you like our conference, by the way?
Oh, I love the conference. And let me just say, whoever did not get to go this year, please sign up right now. Isn't there still a discount or some early bird thing
Yes,
going to be
there is.
offered?
Yeah.
The food is good. The conversation is stimulating. The speakers are fabulous. And you're not paying me to say this. It is the highlight of my year.
I didn't know. I thought maybe there was a misunderstanding and you thought there was a check coming.
No. I love the Catholic Answers Conference.
Yeah.
I love it.
And our guests were so good. Simone Rizcala was fantastic, and then Dr. Lawrence Feingold was fantastic. It was wonderful. Oh, and of course, Bishop Paprocki, who sang Led Zeppelin.
That was so great. So great.
The number is 888-318-7884. Maybe you have marriage questions, preparation questions for yourself. Maybe you're approaching marriage. Maybe for the kids, other relatives, folks that you know. 888-318-7884. So how does the eclectic mind of Rose Sweet think about do-it-yourself marriage preparation?
Well, there are lots of wonderful marriage preparation programs all across the country, lots of different ones that are fabulous. But if you can't get to one, or if you think you don't need one, or whatever the case is, there are some certain important questions you can ask yourself and your future intended to get yourselves more ready for an appropriate and proper consent to marriage.
So that's what you put together for us. Things
Yes.
that you can ask yourself and your intended.
Yes.
It's a little bit old-fashioned, the word "your intended."
I love
do
it.
the kids know what you're talking about when you say "your intended"?
Well, you know what, though? Let's bring some of that back. Do we
I
have
know,
to throw
you're
all
right.
the babies out with the bathwater?
Right. We need to bring back some of that old-fashioned stuff.
No,
I'm going to
they-
get one of those twirly mustaches.
Ooh.
Woo! All right. Tell us what you thought up. What do you got for us?
Okay. So, we know that Jesus is the bridegroom of the church, and we are all his bride. And so
Amen.
marriage has a special meaning in the Catholic Church. It's not just a human construct. We know that. And from the words of Christ, our beloved St. John Paul II drew together through his scripture study 4 marks of the way Jesus loves his bride. 4 different ways, specific ways that Jesus, the bridegroom, loves us. And he loves us freely, fully, faithfully, and fruitfully. And I break these 4 down in a way to ask a series of questions. Am I really approaching this person in this possible marriage free of fear, free of an agenda? Am I afraid that I'll never have kids and I'm 38 years old and my eggs are all drying up and I got to marry this guy because nobody else is coming along? That fear gets in the way of a free consent to marriage. It doesn't mean you're going to have an invalid marriage, but it means that you could have troubles down the way, because your fear always blinds us, right? You agree with that?
Yeah. Yes.
So fear blinds us from making a proper decision to marry. So are you entering this marriage free of fear and agendas, pressure? Does your dad really have a shotgun? And are you pregnant? I mean, this does still happen nowadays.
Right. Yeah. And so a person who's pregnant, for example, even if there is no shotgun, that's an extraordinary psychological pressure.
Huge.
Yeah.
And there's guilt and shame and all kinds of
Right.
things that can confuse and darken the intellect and get in the way of a free choice for marriage.
Okay. Free. Wait, I just got to review the 4 of them. Free, full, faithful, and fruitful.
Yes.
All right, so full.
So we did free, so let's talk about full.
So Jesus freely gave himself for us.
Here's
to
what
us.
Jesus said right in Scripture. No one takes my life from me. I go to that cross for you, my bride, freely. Nothing is compelling me. I am freely going for you.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's our model, both husbands and wives.
It's always Jesus
Okay.
for both of us. Okay, full. Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly, have it to the full. So are you prepared to fully give of yourself? Or do you want to create a prenup? And I know they're ideal in my life coaching with a lot of Catholics who want to do prenups.
Really?
They have amassed a fortune. Maybe they're getting married later. They want to protect some of their property and assets. They do not want divorce, but they're afraid if it happens, they'll lose something real valuable. So they drop an legal agreement to keep it separate the entire life of the marriage.
Wow.
And
that does seem like an impediment to Christian marriage.
well, it's not there's not a full trust there,
Right.
And there's not a full giving of self and everything that comes with self, including your pocketbook.
Yeah, right.
And I know one marriage that it sadly ended in a divorce after about 4 years, but she had children from a prior marriage. He had children, Catholics, got married in church. And she kept her money separate and paid for the tuition for her kids and would not pay a dime out of her money for his kids. And it just was insane.
Yeah, right.
What are we withholding? Now, ladies, I am not talking about hiding the Macy's bags in the trunk of your car from your husband. Because that...
Oh, you're accepting the things you do.
Yes.
The things other people do,
Yes.
no problem. But the stuff you do...
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
No, I can't accept that.
Okay.
You need to talk about the Macy's
That may be
bag.
true for you, but...
Don't say that.
I know. We know that's relativism. No, bad.
Right.
Okay, so what are you holding back? Is there something about your past, something about you that you're hiding so that you can move forward and get the goods of marriage without risking losing it? So are there secrets? You know, what's holding you back?
Right. Okay. So right. Keeping secrets, not being willing to share fully all the material goods.
Right. It's always, remember I talked about the first one is fear. Fear. All four of these, they get damaged by fear.
Okay.
Consent is really damaged by fear. So what are you afraid of opening up yourself completely and totally, even until some kind of death? Because that's what Jesus did for us. So free, full. Now let's talk about...
How many kinds of death are there? What do you mean some kind of death?
The death
You
of a
mean until you die?
friendship. The death of I have a sense of security when I own this property. I have financial security.
Oh, and you don't want to die to that.
And if
see.
I open it up and share it with you legally, that's part of that perceived security dies in me.
Right.
It's all an emotional stuff, but this is how people think. Good Christians and good Catholics.
Right, yeah, I see that. Okay, very good.
Okay, so free, full, faithful. Okay, I know a lot of people get worried that if their sex life goes down the tube or if he or she gains weight and they're not satisfied in that area, they might have a right to get some kind of satisfaction outside the marriage. Maybe it's not a total belief, but it's a partial belief. And usually it takes a while for this to play out. But fidelity isn't just about sexual fidelity. It's about who comes first, your spouse or your mom or dad. Are your mom and dad still giving you money? Are they still calling the shots on what you do and your spouse comes really second to them? Or have you elevated the children to a high level in the family to where the spouse takes a back seat and you're not faithful to the spouse?
Oh, that's a kind of unfaithfulness. I see what you mean, yeah.
That's really unfaithful.
Right.
Because you're saying, you're putting the child and their affection as your number one source of love and affection because you know all his faults or you know all her faults and he's there, but he is not number one. That's a form of infidelity. So,
Okay.
you know, these beautiful truths, these simple 4 things from Scripture, they require us to go a little bit deeper and spend the time in really thinking about what are we bringing into this situation and what's affecting our ability to see clearly.
All right, so free, full, faithful.
Last one, fruitful.
Oh, I was going to do it. What? You jumped on my line.
Well,
All right.
you know what?
Fruitful. Jesus is giving of himself to his bridegroom, the church, is fruitful. It produces fruit.
Life, an abundant life.
Yeah.
And there is a growth and renewal, all kinds of life. And without that kind of love, and we don't get that kind of life. And we were talking about death before. When you close yourself off from somebody, new life can't be produced.
Right.
So fruitful is really an openness, a deep trust and openness. You can still have a little fear in the background because we're all like that. But you're really willing to open yourself up and receive whatever life gives you and that other person gives you. And you're willing to allow the Holy Spirit to bring life out in you from that openness, that open receptivity. And St. John Paul II called it, he loved us women, and he said we have feminine genius in that regard. We are very quick, usually, if we're not damaged, emotionally damaged, to be receptive, to receive others.
And also receptive to new life.
Right,
right. That it's important that marriage include that receptivity.
Right, and a lot of people get married and maybe one wants kids and the other one isn't really sure, but they don't really talk about it. They just hope it'll go away or hope it'll change.
Right. That's then now we're in for pain and struggle.
Big pain. And I remember my father, who married in the 1940s, told me a painful story when I was an adult. He had a first marriage and it was weird. What? When it was still illegal, she aborted at least 2 of their babies that he knew about. And she absolutely she was not open to life. And he knew that going in, and he thought he could change her.
Oh, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So it ended very painfully.
So these are questions to ask ourselves, but also to ask ourselves about our intended, which is my favorite old-fashioned word to use now.
Yes, me too.
Am I freely giving myself? Is this other person freely giving themselves? Do I know that there are reasons this person is entering into this relationship that aren't healthy or free? Am I willing to fully give to this other person, to share the whole of life? I think that's more or less a description of marriage, isn't it?
Yes.
Sharing of the whole of life.
Yes, beautiful.
Am I going to be faithful? Is this other person going to be faithful? Is this other person capable of being faithful?
Yes.
Am I capable of being faithful?
Yes, capacity is different than intent.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. And then fruitful. Are we both willing to be fruitful? I'm looking at the notes. I'm cheating right
That's
now.
okay. You can cheat.
The number is 888-318-7884. I'd love to talk with you. And Rose would love to talk with you about marriage prep. The title of this hour is Do It Yourself Marriage Prep. That is, as much as there are these beautiful programs and all these, the truth is there has to be a conscious choice. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to do the things consciously that we need to do to prepare? So, I mean, in a certain sense, all of it is do it yourself, in the sense that I know there's people that go to the, whatever it is, the pre-Cana or the encounter weekend and all that. It's like a rock just bouncing off the forehead, or it's not, because there's not a willingness to do it.
There's not a receptivity. There's not an openness. Yeah. There's a fear. There it is. There's a fear that if I listen to what the church has to say, I might have to give up something that I don't want to give up.
Yeah.
But I need the permission slip from the church to get married in the church, because my mom would really hate me if I didn't get married in the church. So I'm here at pre-Cana, and it's like, when's cocktail time?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But it's perfectly Catholic to ask when's cocktail time. But that doesn't mean that you... 888-318-7884. We're talking about marriage prep. You want to talk about it in your own situation, maybe a situation of a family member, a friend, a child, a grandchild, whoever. 888-318-7884. Rose Sweet is our guest. We'll be right back with your calls right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
EWTN offers the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass live every morning at 8 Eastern and provides you with daily readings to follow along and enrich your experience. To be sure you don't miss out on the daily Mass or to get access to previous recordings, we can send a link to your email inbox every day. It's easy. Visit EWTN.com and click subscribe. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest this hour, Rose Sweet, in studio with us. If you've got a question for Rose about marriage preparation, you're very welcome here, 888-318-7884. And by the way, the Christian faith, the Catholic Church, has a great deal of wisdom within it regarding marriage, much of it taken from the teaching of Jesus himself, as Rose just demonstrated. But you don't have to be Catholic or Christian to call if you have a question about marriage or marriage preparation or how to be properly disposed to marriage and find out if the other person is properly disposed to marriage. You're welcome as well. We'd like everybody to have a happy marriage. And we Catholics actually believe that we enter into sacramental marriage because Jesus made it a sacrament, but it's the only one of the sacraments that also has a natural form that completely predates the life of Christ on earth.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead.
That kind of marriage, that free, full, faithful, fruitful movement of the human heart is written in man and woman's nature.
Right. There it is, right in our nature. Mm-hmm. And so if you'd like to talk with Rose, who has thought a lot about these things, and I know from personal experience, works really hard on being a good friend of Jesus, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Not that it's always worked to be a friend of Jesus. I mean, he is a very delightful friend as well.
Yes. He is, but some people think he's scary because he has rules.
Oh, yeah. But
right.
It's so funny because there are so few rules, actually. I mean, it's not like, Jesus got all these rules, like you can't murder anyone. Well, were you going to murder someone? Like, why is that? Like,
but that's not the point.
Yeah, right.
I should be free.
Yes, right. I should be free. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Right.
Again, 888-318-7884. Sorry, all the lines are full, and I'm sitting here chatting, and we want to go to the...
Should we go to the lines, or what about that thing on your desk, or save it for later?
Oh, did you want to ask me about this?
Yeah, what is that thing on your desk?
That's called Why We're Pro-Life. That's the new book being given away. Hopefully 1 million copies given away by Catholic Answers to people who have a pro-life ministry, people who do sidewalk counseling, people who are the pastor of a parish, anybody who maybe you got a school, and these are a very simple way of communicating to other people why we're pro-life.
What a good idea. It's almost Thanksgiving, and you know how everybody comes together with their family, and sometimes there's political arguments, and if abortion pops up, why not get one of these and be
prepared.
Be more prepared, right?
Yep, and that's the main thing, is you can prepare yourself by reading it.
Thank you.
Maybe not... You were probably prepared already, but...
Well, I was introduced as a young woman. My mom was in the pro-life movement back in the day.
Me too. My mom was too,
yeah.
What great moms we got.
I know.
888-318-7884 is the number. 888-31-TRUTH. Also, my mom wouldn't let us eat grapes.
What?
Because Cesar Chavez was boycotting grapes at a certain point.
Well, you know what? She was sensitive and trying to be responsible.
Yeah, she was very responsible. She's a good egg, my mom. Robert in Las Vegas, Nevada. You have to say Nevada. Don't say Nevada to people from Nevada. Listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Robert, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. Rose Sweet, love your books. I've been through your divorce recovery program.
Thank you,
wonderful.
Robert.
Pardon me?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Jeez, you're a real hero. I've obviously gotten remarried. Well, not obviously, you would have known that, but I got remarried several years ago. And it's been, my wife she's become semi-disabled. and we had a child around the same time. And so I know she dealt with postpartum a lot, and her physical disabilities, her body's not the same anymore. But how would you advise a couple to stay faithful? And then I feel like a jerk for saying this. I told your screener this. It's been several years since the wife and I have done anything. She doesn't like to cuddle. She doesn't like to hold hands. She doesn't like to do anything at all. Anything. And so I'm still relatively young. I miss the romance. I miss the dancing. I miss going out and having adventures. But I also miss the physical intimacy, which is no longer there. I do struggle now. I'm finding myself, it's been 3 years, I'm struggling a lot. I'm going to confession, trying to figure this out, but I feel like, how do I stay faithful? Because I've been the victim of a spouse, well, I've been in a marriage before where the spouse was unfaithful, and now here I am, and I'm tempted, or I'm in despair, and I'm depressed about it.
Robert, thank you for you're the hero for saying this out loud in a public forum, because you speak for a lot of people, and you are being faithful by sticking with her and not having succumbed. Here's what's happening. You know that a lack of desire for physical or sexual intimacy is a symptom. It's not the real problem. There are deeper roots, and that's what we have to uncover. You know, we are mind, heart, body, and soul, and all of that composite, all of those are affected by trauma. And it sounds like your wife has experienced some kind of trauma, and parts of her want to be intimate, but parts have shut down out of protection and fear. So it sounds like, if you haven't already, I would offer her some counseling with somebody who understands the mind, heart, body, soul composite and help her get to the root of it, rather than say, you know, you need to be more affectionate with your husband. You can't just say that. The real issues have to be uncovered and brought to the light and healed. And the same thing with you, Robert. This is a trauma for you. You are being rejected in your own marriage by your spouse. This is trauma. Now, what you do with it can lead you to sin or lead you to even deeper holiness. And I would say also there are parts of you that want to be faithful and considerate and compassionate, and parts of you that have unmet desires. Who's going to be in charge of those parts? It's like you have a lot of people, the committee in your head, sometimes they say. What you'll need is for your core self to rise up and take charge and nurture yourself and talk to yourself, and in coaching or counseling or something. I know I can go on and on about this, but there is hope for both of you. And since you do know me, why don't, after the show, reach out to me and I'll see what I can do to help both of you.
All right, thank you. I'll just go on your website, right?
Yes, please.
RoseSweet.com.
Right. Thank you very much for your advice, Rose.
Yes, thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. God bless you, brother. Thank you so much for that call. As I said, we got all the lines open. I mean, all the lines full, so I want to make sure that I continue to move.
Can I say one thing? I think
Please.
It's real important for everybody. When we experience any kind of rejection or abuse or overwhelm or any kind of traumatic thing that triggers emotion in us, the first thing that the human person is designed to do is seek safety and soothing. So it's very normal he wants to go to a safe place where he's not carrying this burden and find some kind of soothing. But that's not the answer. You know, kids want to go get candy, and mom goes,
Kids?
No, you know, well, I know. But mom or dad says, no, I know you want to do that, but there's a better way to find safety and soothing or whatever. So anyway, yeah.
Robert, I hope you will reach out to Rose at rosesweet.com. I'm going to go to Saskatchewan, Canada, listening on Real Presence Radio. Jason in Saskatchewan. Thank you very much for your call, Jason. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Hey, Si.
Hi,
Pretty
Jason.
good job on pronouncing Saskatchewan, too, by the way.
Well, it was spelled phonetically for me by Sarah. She wasn't going to let me fail.
I have to say, it's pretty. I've listened to you guys for over 10 years. I called in once about 10 years ago, and you guys really helped me out. So pretty cool to be back in the air with you. So my question, it's not for me. It's for someone I care deeply about. They, I guess you could describe them as a fallen away Catholic. Were raised in the Catholic Church, received all their sacraments, but fell away, as many have, and then married their husband in Protestant ceremony. And I was just wondering, is that marriage valid, or what obligations would they have in that situation to improve that situation?
Jason, let me ask you a question. If she fell away from the church and left the church and left the teachings of her childhood and rejected that and did not get married in the Catholic manner, as all Catholics are required to do, and did it her way, do you think that is a valid marriage?
Well, the caveat to that is, while I say she was raised in the faith, I mean in the modern sense of she went to a Catholic school that was supposed to teach her the faith, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So,
I gotta take a break, Jason. I'm sorry, the music just started and
Well,
I got
let's
no
come
choice
back to
about it.
this.
Hang on a quick second, Jason. We will be right back with more with Jason in Saskatchewan and Rose here in San Diego after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book, $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with Why We're Pro-Life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Matt Swaim here. Monday on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the feast of St. Daniel Comboni, founder of the Comboni Missionaries. Plus news, weather, sports, and more. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. All the lines full at the moment, so lots of folks to talk to about, and which is good. I'm glad, because this is an important topic to talk about, marriage prep. And the theme of our show is do-it-yourself marriage prep, that there are things that we need to do to prepare for marriage. And Jason in Saskatchewan, Canada, called with a question, for not for himself, but for someone else. She was kind of nominally raised Catholic, then got married in a Protestant ceremony. What's the status of her marriage? And you were in the midst of a conversation.
And Jason, you also indicated that she was kind of nominally Catholic and didn't really go very deep. Well, even though you don't agree with mom and dad's curfew or mom and dad's rules, you're part of the family and you must live by the family rules, whether you agree with them, understand them, or hate them. So it's the same thing with the Catholic Church. Our baptism requires us to marry in the Catholic manner for our own good and everybody's good, and we just don't like it and run off somewhere else, then that automatically, her consent is invalid. And so her civil marriage right now is it's a valid civil marriage, I presume, but it's an invalid marriage bond in the eyes of the Church. And technically, she is in the state of adultery because she does not have a valid marriage bond. So the remedy for that is somebody to come listen to her and love her and invite her to the fullness of truth, which would be go get your prior marriage. Let's see if there were grounds for annulment, and we can have the church declare that as a null and void situation, and then have your current marriage raised to the level of a sacrament by convalidation. And in between that time, you do not live as husband and wife and receive the fullness of the sacraments. So that's a short order of a very complex situation. Does that help, Jason?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that clarity, and just thank you guys again at Catholic Answers for doing everything you do.
Thank you, Jason. That's really nice. I appreciate that. It never hurts to have somebody say nice things to you.
No, Catholic
Never hurts.
Answers is wonderful. You guys
Yeah.
saved me too back in the day when it was Carl Keating. I mean, I was hungry, and there it was. It was.
I know. I've had. I still have that experience of Catholic media where it'll break through something that I needed broken through. Yeah, all the time. Francis in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. We're glad you're here, Francis. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Hey, thanks. Hi, Rose. I've actually never listened to your show before, but I had the opportunity to tune in, and it was an interesting topic.
Oh, well,
Hi,
we're glad you're
Francis.
here, Francis.
Yay.
My wife and I got married 2 years ago in the Catholic Church. We went through marriage prep. She's 18 years older than I am, has had 4 kids, and had her tubes tied. And I remember there being a little bit of contention there before getting married. And slowly over time, like, we were together before I reverted to my faith. And now, even in our relationship, I'm slowly growing more and more in my faith. And she's not Catholic. But anyways, what am I saying? So the more I learn now about marriage, full, faithful, fruitful, like it's like that fruitfulness it's almost like we're totally canceling it out by her having her tubes tied. And I'm just wondering, like, did I slip through the cracks? Like, was that sinful? Was there, like, is there a remedy for this? Can we be fruitful in other ways? Like, what's...
Wonderful, Francis. That's very clear. Very clear
yes,
question.
beautiful question. No, you can't be fruitful in having your own children, but you mentioned she has 4 children from a prior relationship, and you certainly can be fruitful in your love and your bonding with those children and other people's children and relatives. Fruitfulness, remember that by nature, some people can never be fruitful by having biological children. There's some physical impediment. So it's not a mandate. It's the fruitfulness is that you are first open and receptive naturally and are not barring that or blocking that artificially or intentionally to block out life for some selfish reason. So yes, you can be fruitful in lots of ways, but, and you also asked about sin. I want to address that too. This is hard for you, I know. Here we are, people who, I just love this topic. God always will draw us more deeply into intimacy with him as the older we get. And so if our spouse is also not in a relationship with him, there's going to be created this big distance between us and our spouse as we move closer to our Lord. And that's a cross to bear and a sorrow. It doesn't mean it has to be the end of the marriage, but it means you need to look at it, be honest about it, and put it in its proper order. It's a cross to be borne, but you can still be loving and still have a good marriage. So bear that cross, pray for her, sacrifice for her, love her the best that you can, frequent the sacraments, and mourn the loss of the things that you would have liked to have had with her. Go through the proper grieving process and offer that to our Lord.
Francis, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Well,
I really like that, what you had to say.
Well, I'm glad you caught our show today. I hope we'll get to talk again. I'm going to keep moving, however, and so I have to say excuse me because every line stays full. I can't.
Francis, we're praying for you too.
Yeah, praise God. Thanks, Francis. And you can always find Rose at rosesweet.com. I'm going to go to Betty in Iowa, listening on Catholic Radio, KFHC. Glad to have you here, Betty. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Thank you. When our parents' will, they stated that their money would go to their children, and if the child died, it would go to the grandchildren. Well, our parents have now passed, and when we got that money, we invested it, but I invested it equally between my husband and my children. Is that wrong in a marriage?
Okay, wait, Betty, let me clarify that. So your parents willed you some money. It went to you, legally to you, right?
Yes.
And only to you.
On their passing.
Okay, and only...
Yes, but if I had passed before they passed, it would have gone directly to the grandchildren.
Okay, to your children.
Right.
Okay, so here's where there's no problem there at all, but where it would come is that once you receive that money in the marriage, if you treated it as separate and didn't let your husband even know about it or have any say about it or be involved with that gift, then you are now cutting yourself off and creating division and separation. It's actually a form of divorce within the marriage, and that could be sinful. But it doesn't sound like you did that. It just sounds like the two of you talked about it, and you decided to split it up the way that you both agreed, and you're good.
Yes, we did go to the financial advisor or a financial person together and did it.
Good.
And I just felt it wasn't my money to start with. And I felt I was honoring my parents' wishes, except I included my husband. So.
But that seems. But as much as you were honoring your parents' wishes, they left the money to you, and you were free to include your husband.
And I would say obliged to not look at it or consider it separately, like I have control over this and you don't. The minute you have that in a marriage, it's a slippery slope.
But Betty sounds just the opposite of that.
I know, Betty, you did
so
good.
Generous to everyone.
So let's give Betty an A. Betty, you did good.
Okay, Betty?
Thank you. And God bless you, too.
You too. Thank you. I don't know. I feel like we kept talking. We could have got a little of the money for ourselves.
Really?
I'm not sure, but I feel
I like the way you think, Cy Kellett.
Betty was awful nice. Anonymous right here. Do I have time? No, I'll tell you what, Anonymous. I'm sorry. Hang on a quick second. I got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Do-It-Yourself Marriage Prep with Rose Sweet on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Divine Intimacy Radio.
The greatest joy in my life is helping others to come to know Christ more fully. And there's no better light on this path, the path to deep union with God, than the wisdom of the saints. Talking about this daily on EWTN Radio is one of the great joys of my life.
Divine Intimacy Radio, Sunday, 6:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Rose Sweet is our guest. We're talking about marriage, and there are lots of calls on the line, so I'm going to just keep going to folks. Up next is Anonymous, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Anonymous, go ahead with your question for Rose.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Well, first, I just want to say that I love the show. I'm trying to watch it every day during the week. So thank you so much for everything that you all are doing. I have learned so much about the Catholic faith. Rose, thank you for being in the show today.
Thank you.
So I have a question, and if any advice that you can provide, I would really appreciate it if you are allowed to. So my question is, I'm going to tell you the question and then the scenario. I want to know if in this case that I'm going to present to you, my wife didn't really put in practice being faithful to the marriage. So before I married my wife, I'm Catholic, and my wife never been Catholic. She was a part of the JW, and since she was, during childhood. When we met, I was not aware, and then I found out a few months later, and I kind of told her that I can't marry somebody that practiced that cult because I was Catholic. So she decided we, make an arrangement that she would not go back to that cult, and then we married, not through the Catholic Church. So we had a family, we have kids, and, we have all together. And then almost like 2 years ago, she decided to go back to the cult, to the Jehovah's Witness religion. So at this time, right now, I won't be able to marry through the Catholic Church. And then also, I'm unable to receive the body and blood of our Lord on Sunday, as you know. So, and I'm really struggling right now to keep my marriage. It's been very difficult times, especially because we have kids. And we even baptized my kids to the Catholic Church, but I had to stop in order for her to prevent putting my kids into that religion. So this is the case scenario. So I would really appreciate any thought that you have about this.
Okay, and thank you for this. Remember, it's never my thoughts. It's what the church teaches, and that's what I love. We can bank on that. First of all, if you were a baptized Catholic and you married anybody outside the Catholic Church, you're not in a valid marriage.
Yes, correct.
Okay, you and your wife may marry validly in the Catholic Church. She does not have to become Catholic, but you will get permission from your bishop to marry a non-Catholic woman in the Catholic Church, and you can have your marriage convalidated. That's not an issue. But I think it sounds like the deeper issue is, you mentioned that there was infidelity, and she's tied to a cult, and you've had problems, and I know you have children, but let's leave that as a separate thing for now. I think it sounds like the two of you need some good, solid marriage counseling to figure out what's going on with your marriage. In the meantime, if you will share with her that you would like to receive the sacraments and come back to your faith, then you make a good confession, you go back to the Holy Eucharist, and you live as brother and sister. And just tell her you're not rejecting her as a person, but you are saving the gift of sexual intimacy for when you are validly married together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Do it. Get counseling, go to confession, live as brother and sister, and work to convalidation if that's the case.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Ross.
God bless you. Praying for both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anonymous, very much. We're going to go down to St. Croix is how I say it, but that's probably not the right way to say it. Down in the Virgin Islands. This is Catholic media right here. Remy's listening to Iowa Talk Radio in St. Croix, Virgin Islands. Remy, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question.
Hi. Well, okay. So back in 2011, I met I was baptized and I did my first communion, but I was in a very non-practicing Catholic family. And in 2011, I met a girl. We got married. I was her third marriage. 12 months later, we got divorced. I was non-practicing. I was out in the world. In 2018, I was evangelized into an evangelical group. I went on missions for 2 years, came back, and then came back to the church a year ago, and I've been faithfully going.
Praise God.
Yeah, amen. So now I'm living in St. Croix, and I'm single, and I'm like, was my marriage valid? We got married in football jerseys on 12/12/12 because we thought it was cool in front of a judge.
Okay, God bless you, Remy. So here's your standing in the Catholic Church. You're a beloved member of the Catholic family and always have been since your baptism as an infant. What you did is called an attempted marriage, and it was invalid because you did not get married in the Catholic manner. But what you have to do is go to your local parish and /tribunal and get that marriage, convalidated, annulled through the lack of form. process. It's a documentary process. You just show your baptism certificate and your marriage and your civil divorce, and they will do it. It's a paperwork thing. It takes about 2 weeks in my local diocese, maybe a month. Other places, it's very short. And then you will be a single man.
Free to marry.
Free to marry.
Well, but here's my question. A year ago, 6 months ago, I was living in Jackson, Mississippi. Like I said, the Lord's been taking me everywhere. And that's when I went and sat down with my local parish priest who helped me come back to the church. And when I shared, I'm Mexican American. He was a priest from Mexico. When I shared that with him, he was like, "Oh, you were never married."
Yeah, he's right.
Okay. Remember, you just because somebody, and God, I'm going to say this so carefully. I love priests, but just because somebody wears a Roman collar, it doesn't mean they always have the proper understanding or the correct answer. And this is what I love in today's world. You can get the right answer at Catholic Answers and in the Catechism of the Catholic Church and more places. No, you were never married, but you as a protection to you, the dignity of her. The sanctity of marriage and for the good of the community, you need to go address that with your tribunal and make it of proper order.
Sounds great. Now, what would her involvement be? Because I don't even.
None.
I know she's been remarried twice more, but I don't know where she is.
No, don't worry about it. This is you. By the fact you were Catholic and you're married outside the church, it's automatic, null and void, and it's called a documentary process. It's just paperwork.
Okay, Remy?
God bless you guys. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to Father Louis on tomorrow.
Take the high path, man.
I'm sorry you're stuck in St. Croix, Virgin Islands. Sorry about that, but I guess we.
Hey, we're in San Diego.
I know. I guess I shouldn't talk that way. Tanya. Listening in
Canada.
Listening. It's Tanya.
That's what it says. The first in Canada.
Canada, listening to EWTN on Channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio. Who got it right, Tanya or Tanya?
You got it right. I'm reading the notes.
But I get Tanya all the time. All the time I get Tanya, so it doesn't matter.
Don't worry, I'm not going to gloat much.
Put 2 A's in there.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah. Okay, I'm 47. I was born and raised Catholic. I was married for 19 years and married Catholic, and my husband had an affair. We shared 3 kids. I talked to my local priest what to do. He told me that I had to get a divorce and an annulment, and I got the divorce in 2017. I've been with my fiance for 13 years, and he has a daughter, and I have 3, so we have kids together, but none, just him and I together. He's a Baptist. He's saying I don't need an annulment, because mainly it's going to cost $1,000. So he's saying that I can just get married Baptist, and I don't want to go against God or the Word, or I was born and raised Catholic. So I don't know what am I even allowed to marry a Baptist?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, yes. Okay, good. This is good. First of all, an annulment doesn't cost $1,000. If you show hardship to your local most tribunals don't charge anything. And if they do have a little fee, you just show hardship and let's get that money off the table. That's not and I don't think that's the real issue anyway. Second of all, anybody who's been validly baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit with water, with the intentions of the church, is validly baptized, and therefore can receive the sacrament of baptism and also enter into a sacramental marriage. So we believe that Baptists who have a valid baptism, according to the Catholic Church, there are brothers and sisters. He has a valid baptism, and he has the capacity to enter into a valid marriage and even a sacramental marriage if the other person also has a valid baptism. Let's go put that aside and go back to you. You're Catholic.
Okay.
You got to get married in the Catholic Church, period.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Otherwise, you attempt marriage only, and you bring a lot of issues and problems to the situation. So he needs to get... You need to get an annulment, and
okay. So the priest that I talked to that was in my new neighborhood that I'm living in, he's the one that told me that it can be done in St. John, New Brunswick, but it's going to cost us $1,000. So,
No.
I guess I should have Googled it or talked to the priest in Fredericton.
You know what?
Call the diocese. You can call the diocesan office.
Tanya,
Okay.
and if you have any problem, this is one of my areas of expertise. I wrote a book on annulments. So you email me or text me or call me, and I will help you in any way I can.
Okay,
But
good.
I love, here's
And
what, wait, don't go against the Catholic Church and your upbringing, and go ask God for the graces to go deeper into the understanding of the beauty of our faith.
So he can, like, does he have to change over to become a Catholic in order to?
No. When we said this earlier, you may marry almost anybody with the bishop's permission. If you marry an unbaptized person, you definitely have to get the bishop's permission, and your parish will take care of that. You can marry him in the Catholic Church. Now, let me ask you another question.
So he doesn't have to change.
He does
No.
not have to
Family's very
change.
strong Baptist.
Tanya,
Okay.
just so you know, I when my wife and I got married, she was not baptized. It was a valid marriage.
Okay.
It became a sacramental
Okay.
marriage when she was baptized. You just have to have permission of the bishop.
Now, let me ask you another question. Has he been married before?
Yes.
Ta-da! Okay, the Catholic
Yeah.
Church, that's right. The Catholic Church will recognize that marriage vow as valid until proved otherwise. So
he would need like a copy of his divorce too?
he would need to go, and I'd have to find out, unless, if he married, his prior marriage, if she was a Catholic, that could be a quick and easy dissolution. Okay? But if she wasn't, then he's going to have to go through the long form, and he'll probably hit the roof when he hears that, because everybody does because they don't understand. But let me help you if I can. I love to help people in these sticky situations.
Yes, because his father keeps saying, when are you guys going to get married and stop living in sin? And I feel so bad, and we've been together for so long, and we just got to do it. We've just been, raising our kids, and now they're slowly leaving the house. And
Okay,
we
Tanya,
wanna
let's
get it done, but I
get.
want to get it done right.
Okay, let's get you guys fixed up. You please reach out to me after the show. Rose@rosesweet.com.
Okay, Tanya?
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
God bless you, because
Okay.
there's many people in the church who just want to help you with this, and to be settled and not to be upset or lacking peace. So I hope you will. Rose@rosesweet.com. I got to try to get Lois on in Texas, listening on 88.5 KBMD. Lois, you're going to have to be quick if you want an answer from Rose.
Okay, thanks for taking my call. My husband died a little over 2.5 years after a 30-plus year marriage, but he also suffered 18 years of that with the different stages of Alzheimer's.
I'm sorry.
Actually,
Lois.
Rose, I had the pleasure of talking to you when you were on with Stan Tall.
Oh, hi, Lois.
So I'm not expecting you to remember. Anyhow, I have dipped my toe into dating. Started out with Catholic Match. Unfortunately, hasn't gone well, but so I switched over to Match. Gone back and forth. I'm like 2-3 months into this, but I actually there's somebody's interested, and I have absolutely froze. I mean, they just asked the question like, "What good restaurants are there?" And I'm like, I can't respond.
Rose, you only got 45 seconds, so
Okay,
you better give her
Lois, since we've talked before, please reach out to me. I can't give you all the advice in 45 seconds, but first of all, just take a deep breath and calm down, and remember that God is with you in everything, and you can get help through this. Don't stress out about it. I will help you.
Okay, is that all right, Lois?
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
very good. I can't imagine freezing up after 30 years of marriage and 2.5. I'm just kidding,
No.
Rose.
I know. It's like you
You're
go.
looking at me.
I
know.
No, I know. It is. It's a shock.
Yeah. Rose, thanks for doing this with us.
This is wonderful.
I mean,
Thanks.
I'm sorry that there are folks still left on the line, but it's obvious that this show is needed because
I know.
of the number of calls. But you can find out more about Rose at rosesweet.com. Rosesweet.com. That's her real name, and there's lots of good stuff there.
Thank you, Sai.
You'll come back again, right?
I would love to.
I didn't know you were cheating on us with other radio programs. I had no idea that you were
It's
doing
not
that.
infidelity.
feels a little hurtful.
Free, full, faithful, fruitful
It
love.
feels a little hurtful. I don't know. I don't know how to make sense of this, but right now I'm a little hurt. Can't even look at you, Rose.
Oh, here we go
Jimmy
again.
Aiken coming up. We're going to finish the week with weird questions for Jimmy Aiken. You're a good one, Rose. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Si.
Right back with Jimmy. love that music, Taryn. I always forget we're going to get the weird music when we do Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, and it comes as such a nice surprise. Welcome back. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest this hour, which is an awful good thing because this hour it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Jimmy's senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and probably knows more about spoon bending than anyone else at Catholic Answers because that was the show today on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hi, Jimmy.
I probably do, and I've actually, the twist in the episode is, of today's episode of Mysterious World on spoon bending is that I've actually done it. I went to a spoon bending party recently, and I was successful, and so I tell you all about exactly what happened, and if you watch the video version, or even just the episode art for the audio version, you get to see the spoon I bent. It's got a 180-degree turn in it.
Nice. All right.
It's 3 millimeters of stainless steel.
I'm gonna have to listen to this on the way home tonight. So that'll be my drive home, listening to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You should listen to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World too. I think are we over 200 episodes now?
Oh yeah, this is today's episode is 227.
Nice. 227 episodes there for you. So,
and some bonus episodes as well.
Plus, that's just you because you also wrote a book, A Daily Defense, 365 Days, plus one to becoming a better apologist. You're always giving that a little extra effort there, Jimmy.
I try to do that, yeah.
That was probably why people like the shows and the books and all that stuff. All right, so Weird Questions people should know is they're all sent to us via the internets. Jimmy collects them for us, and then I ask them of Jimmy, and he answers them. And part of the reason we started...
That's usually how question asking and answering works, yeah.
But part of the reason we started not doing this show live is that you really get weirder questions if you let people write them and send them in. I mean, sometimes people will ask a question that's not weird at all, and it kind of breaks the whole premise. So I can guarantee you we got some weird questions for you.
Yeah, there's a difference between weird and obscure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm going to start with a question from Kat. Kat asks, can St. Padre Pio still give absolution?
So St. Padre Pio is a saint, so he's in heaven, which means he's dead. And the short and safe answer to the question would be that the sacraments require a priest to be alive to administer the sacraments. However, there is reason to think about that a little more deeply, because being ordained to the priesthood makes a permanent mark on your soul. So priests are still priests in the afterlife, just like baptism makes a permanent mark on your soul. So you're still a baptized person even in the afterlife. And so if the graces of baptism follow us with the mark, then the graces of being a priest should also follow the priest into the afterlife as well. And one of those graces is the ability to confect the sacraments. And so hypothetically, it would seem to at least be conceptually possible that a priest in the afterlife could administer the sacraments if he were in a position to do so, like if God allowed him to manifest to the living and the living could then confess to him. There are even reports in the literature of approved private revelations of some extraordinary things happening with sacraments. Like, for example, the children at Fatima reported that an angel brought Holy Communion to them, and they received Holy Communion from the hands of an angel. Also, Padre Pio himself, and I talked about this in an episode of Mysterious World I did a little while ago on Padre Pio. It was the episode on bilocation, and in talking about Padre Pio's bilocation experiences, he reported that even though he was physically in his monastery, he bilocated to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And while he was bilocating to St. Peter's Basilica, a young woman came to him for confession, and he heard her confession and absolved her through the bilocation, and then he later met her in person. and they had both shared this same experience. So there are reports of extraordinary sacramental experiences, and so the answer to the question is more interesting and more ambiguous than it might appear. I mean, the simple thing is to say no.
Right.
But when you look at the history of these things, there's more possibility there. So if Padre Pio appeared to me in an authentic vision and absolved me, I would be inclined to regard it as at least an indication that I was in a state of grace afterwards.
Kat, thank you. Now, see, that is a good weird question. Absolution after death. That's a good weird question. That fits the category perfectly.
Absolution of a living person after the death of the absolver.
Right. Jimmy Akin's our guest. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, and we got time for more. We got another question before we have to go to break, at least one more. Kaylin asked this, Jimmy. If a faithful Catholic couple who are not yet married but want to be were able to find each other or happen to already be spending time together during a cyber attack or catastrophic natural disaster that ended modern society as we know it, how would they go about getting married? If they had no way to find a priest, would they just have to wander around the wasteland until they found one? Or could they make their vows in the presence of whatever witnesses they could find?
So this is something, not this exact scenario, but the principle that answers the question is actually dealt with in canon law. It's in canon 1116, so 1116, and it says this: if a person competent to assist according to the norm of law, meaning assisted a marriage, so that would be a priest, and specifically your pastor, unless it's someone else that's received approval. If a person competent to assist according to the norm of law cannot be present or approached without grave inconvenience, so that's a key term, grave inconvenience, like might be caused by a civilization-ending disaster.
Often very inconvenient.
Those who intend to enter into a true marriage can contract it validly and licitly before witnesses only, 1, in danger of death, or 2, when danger of death might be present in a civilization-ending disaster, or 2, outside of the danger of death, provided that it is prudently foreseen that the situation will continue for a month. So if you have a civilization-ending disaster and you prudently foresee that you're not going to be able to find your pastor or another approved priest for a month, you and your betrothed can get married just in front of whatever witnesses you can find.
That it really eases my mind, because in a civilization-ending disaster, I don't know, it'd be very hard.
And that's the time you really need to get hitched, because if there's been a civilization-ending disaster, we need to start having babies fast.
Yes, stat. We need some families. All right, so Kaylin, I'm very appreciative of the question. Thank you very much for sending it. We got a whole bunch more weird questions for Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Starting to talk again. But
underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN, teaching the truth.
I did not grow up religious. This morning, as I was chaotically driving around looking for a COVID testing site, I actually saw your radio station on somebody's car in front of me. Something told me to listen up, and so I switched up to the station and just started listening. And now here I am on the phone talking to you guys.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. That cool music means it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. I just mentioned to Jimmy during the break, and I'll mention to you so you can keep them in your prayers, that Darren is a bit distracted at the soundboard because child number 5 looks like he or she may want to come today or tomorrow. So he's got a lot on his mind. A prayer for Darren and Rena and for their family would be very, very welcome.
It's such a great thing, especially after the last question, just in case we have a civilization-ending disaster.
I know.
But babies at any time are awesome.
The next question comes from Shane. Shane asks, in Psalm 139 in the New American Bible, it says, "If I ascend to the heavens, you are there. If I lie down in Sheol..."
Hey, you said it right.
I was hoping I got that right.
I was going to correct you if you didn't. It is not Sheol, it's Sheol. Good.
Well, thank you. I learned. If I lie down in Sheol, you are there too. So what exactly is Sheol?
Sheol is a Hebrew word that is used in connection with the afterlife. The way that ancient Israelites envisioned what happened in the afterlife, and of course this was before Jesus opened the gates of heaven, but the way they envisioned it is when you died, your soul descended to a place called Sheol. And there are some Bible translations that will translate the Hebrew word Sheol with the English term grave, but that's not really a great translation, in part because ancient Israelites often didn't dig graves that you would lower someone into. They often buried, there are lots of caves in Israel, and they'd very frequently bury people in caves. I mean, like we see that with Jesus in a tomb that he goes into horizontally. Same thing for Lazarus. Same thing for Abraham and Sarah. They're buried in a cave. So were Israel himself, the patriarch Jacob, and his son Joseph. In fact, Israel and Jacob are unique in part of the way they got buried. Not everybody knows this, but if you read Genesis, they both died in Egypt. So, Psychelet, what is the most, and they were prestigious, you know, because Joseph was basically the prime minister of Egypt, and Jacob was his father. So they were very prestigious. What's the prestigious way to get buried in Egypt? And I don't mean in a pyramid, because that's old. That's not so what happened. Kingdom.
That's old kingdom.
Yeah. What happens with your body when you die and they're getting you ready in Egypt?
Let me ask my mummy. She might know.
She might know. Yeah. They mummify you, and actually, both Jacob, the patriarch Israel himself, and Joseph were mummified. And it talks about that in Genesis. It mentions, in fact, now the way they mummified you in Egypt was the first thing they would do, they'd take out all your organs and stuff. And since this is a Weird Question show, I'll even mention how they got the brain out. A lot of people know, because little boys love to know this, because it's a little gross. But the way they got your brain out was they took it out through the nose. And Egyptologists wondered for a long time exactly how did they get it out. And what they assumed, because they had found these implements, and I will get back to Sheol, but this is just cool. This is just cool. So they found these coat hanger-like implements that were involved in the process, and they had, like, you know, images on tomb walls of these being used, or papyrus images of them being used, where they would insert the rod. It's kind of like a coat hanger with a hook on the end of it. They'd insert that through your nose and go through the ethmoid bone to get into the brain. And then the Egyptologists assumed they would bring out the brain piece by piece. Well, in the late 20th century, an Egyptologist named Bob Breyer, who I'm going to be having on Mysterious World to talk about mummies, actually did an archaeological experiment where they used someone had donated their body to science, and they mummified it, and to figure out how did this exactly work. And they found out that there's no way you can get the brain out a piece at a time through the nose. It's like tofu.
Right.
You know, the hook just goes right through it. And so what they finally figured out they had to do was lay the mummy on its back, stick in the implement, swish it around to liquefy the brain, and then flip the mummy on its stomach so that the brain would drain out the nose.
Oh, good Lord.
So that's exactly the kind of thing little boys love to know about. So for all the little boys in the audience, you're welcome.
You're welcome right now.
In any event, they would, after they did all that, they would pack you in natron, which is a substance that occurs naturally in Egypt. It's essentially a combination of baking soda and table salt in chemical terms, and it would dry you out. And they put you in the natron for 30 days, and then you still had enough moisture in you to that they could like pose your body and like cross your hands over your chest and stuff. And then they would complete the process. The whole thing took 70 days. Well, in ancient Israel, so here's the connection back to the Bible. In ancient Israel, they didn't embalm people. They buried them the same day.
Mm-hmm.
The person dies, put them in the tomb, come back in a year when their flesh has decomposed, and clean their bones and put them in a bone box, in an ossuary. Well, for the benefit of the readers of Genesis, the author explains when he says that they embalmed or mummified Jacob, Israel himself, that the whole process took 70 days. And to an ancient Israelite, which is what our records from Egypt confirm, you had to bury the body on the 70th day after death. And so our Egyptological records confirm what it says in Genesis. But because the idea of embalming was not used in ancient Israel, 70 days, that would be mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Why would it take 70 days? And so the author of Genesis adds the comment to get the Israelite reader over that conceptual hurdle, because that's how long it takes to embalm someone in the Egyptian way. So
wow.
actually both Jacob and Joseph were mummified, and then at the time of the Exodus they brought their mummies with them back to Egypt and also buried them in caves. And so they were buried horizontally. They didn't descend like a lot of other people didn't descend. They weren't lowered into graves. They were put into graves sideways. And that's one reason why grave is not a good translation of Sheol. It's really a term for the place of the dead in the afterlife, which is conceptualized as being below ground. And we see a parallel instance of that in 1 Samuel, where now one of the requirements in Deuteronomy is you don't consult an inquirer of the dead, or what today we would call a medium. You don't get your oracles that way. You go to a prophet for your oracle. Well, King Saul in 1 Samuel is having, I want to say it's 1 Samuel 28, is having a bit of a crisis because he's in a dangerous battle situation and he needs to ask a question of the Lord, but the Lord is not picking up the phone. He is not answering by prophets or by dreams or by Urim and Thummim. And so if God's not going to answer him, how's he going to get the information he wants? And what he decides to do, even though he himself has previously commanded that all the inquirers of the dead, all the mediums be expelled from Israel, he says, find me one. And so his men happen to know that there is a medium at the town of Endor. And this is the basis. This is the so-called Witch of Endor. Witch is not a good translation, but this is the Witch of Endor, who's the basis of the character Endora from the TV show Bewitched. So he goes to the Witch of Endor, let's call her Endora just for fun, and she says, who do you want me to bring up for you? And he says, Samuel. And so Samuel's ghost then emerges from the ground, and Saul gets to ask his question. And Samuel's message is, first thing Samuel says is, "Why have you disturbed me?" So it's like, I was down there, I was at peace in Sheol, and now you've brought me up. Why are you bugging me? And Saul says, "Well, I have this battle question I need to ask you." And so he does. And Samuel says, "Well, guess what? You're doomed." and he
You're
goes
doomed.
back down.
Good night.
Yeah. But you see how, again, they're conceptualizing Sheol as being the place of the dead, as being below ground. And that also carried over into the New Testament era. When you read in the New Testament, the Greek word that is used for the place of the dead is Hades, from which we get in English Hades. Hades is not the place of the damned. It's where the dead in general go. And it was also a place in the Greek mind that you descended to. And so Sheol is simply a Hebrew term that's used for the place of the dead in the afterlife, and it's equivalent to Hades or Hades as well. But the situation has now changed because as a result of the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, heaven is now opened to those who die in God's friendship. And so saints tend to go up rather than down, at least conceptually.
Very, very good. I'm very grateful for that question because sometimes the discurses are more just as much fun as the answer to the question. So thanks, Shane. I will try not to dream about the brain thing tonight. But
at least you can rest confident that there are biblical mummies.
Yes, right, exactly.
Bible mummies.
Next one comes from Jordan. Yes, next one comes from Jordan. I heard a priest created a machine allowing him to see the events of the crucifixion as they happened. Then the Vatican excommunicated him. Is this a true-ish story?
No, this is not true. It's not even true-ish.
Okay.
Although I have seen the theme explored elsewhere. My favorite comic book series is the Legion of Superheroes, which is set in the 31st century. And by the 31st century, they have time travel. And so there's one issue, and actually the author of this issue happened to be Jewish, but there's this one issue where you're at the 31st Century Time Institute, and they're talking about what they should do with their time viewer. And one of the scientists, who's an alien, I mean, he doesn't even look human, is talking to one of the human scientists and says, "We could finally solve the great mystery of AD 33.
Oh.
and I love this alien saying, "Let's use the time viewer to watch the crucifixion and resurrection." I just think that's awesome.
Right, yeah. So, but this priest was not excommunicated, or he didn't invent the machine?
Both.
Okay.
And also he didn't exist.
Okay. That's 3 strikes against him, Jordan. I hope you're satisfied with that answer. The next question comes from Mary Rose. Well, it's kind of a two-parter.
She has 2. We can probably do at least the first before the break.
Okay, then let's do question 1 from Mary Rose. Speaking in tongues and resting in the Spirit, are they always legit, or are they sometimes psychological?
Okay, so we should probably define them first, just for people who might not be familiar. Speaking in tongues is a phenomenon that has been reported ever since biblical days. It's also reported in other cultures, but it is reported beginning in the book of Acts as something that happened on the day of Pentecost, and it's been reported periodically down through church history. It has not always been understood the same way. If you look at the biblical evidence, it seems that the biblical form of speaking in tongues is speaking in a language that you don't naturally know. That's what the word tongue means. It can either mean, in Greek, tongue, glossa, can either refer to the thing in your mouth, or it can refer to the language that you speak using the thing in your mouth. And even sometimes today we'll talk about the English tongue or the French tongue or the German tongue to refer to those different languages. Well, that was the normal way to refer to languages back then. And so if you're speaking in other tongues, the natural way to understand that is speaking in other languages. And that's consistent with what we see, if you study the text carefully, with what we see both in Acts and in 1 Corinthians and so forth in the New Testament. Resting in the Spirit is a modern spiritual phenomenon that has not, at least to my knowledge, been reported throughout church history. It used to be called being slain in the Spirit, and it was something that was popularized in the 20th century in the Pentecostal and charismatic movements outside the Catholic Church and sometimes inside the Catholic Church, where someone would go to a Pentecostal or charismatic gathering and they would be so overcome by the Holy Spirit that they would faint. And you would even see, you can see videos of people going to such revivals, and the minister will be walking up to people and touching them on the forehead, and they just keel over. And originally this was called being slain in the Spirit, because you fall down as if you've been killed, but you really haven't been killed. And so these days, the terminology has shifted, and it's more often called resting in the Spirit. But that's basically what it is. It's an overpowering experience that kind of knocks you out or causes you to fall over. As to whether they're always legit or sometimes psychological, here's our cliffhanger.
We will be right back to solve that cliffhanger and get more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with Why We're Pro-Life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Matt Swaim here. Monday on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the feast of St. Daniel Comboni, founder of the Comboni Missionaries. Plus news, weather, sports, and more. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour on Catholic Answers Live. And Mary Rose asked Jimmy if speaking in tongues and resting in the Spirit are always legit, or are they sometimes psychological? We left you with a little cliffhanger. Are they always legit, or are they sometimes psychological?
Well, like anything preternatural things including the paranormal and also the supernatural, anything preternatural is like anything natural. It's not always one thing or always the other. I mean, sometimes when you're out in the desert and you're looking down the road, you see water in the road, and sometimes it's water and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's an illusion caused by the heat.
Yeah.
So we would and the same thing is true with other phenomena. Sometimes you're looking at the genuine phenomenon, and sometimes you're not. Sometimes it's just something that looks like it or is similar to it in some ways. So when it comes to things like speaking in tongues or resting in the Spirit, I'm sure that sometimes speaking in tongues is real because it's reported in the Bible. Resting in the Spirit is not reported in the Bible, but as the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith pointed out a few years ago, the the lists of charismatic phenomena in Scripture are not exhaustive, and they're also not frozen. God can give different gifts in different ages. So could someone have an experience of the Holy Spirit that's so powerful that they faint or otherwise go limp? Sure, I don't see why not. The Holy Spirit can affect people subtly or very powerfully, and I don't see why that's not an unreasonable thing to have happen at least some of the time. So I would think some of the time both speaking in tongues and resting in the Spirit are going to be legitimate, but a lot of people also want to have spiritual manifestations of an extraordinary nature. And that can result in a lot of people out of innocently, but just out of a genuine desire to experience things like this. It can lead them to convince themselves that that's what's happening, when really that's not what's happening. And so some of the times I think that speaking in tongues and resting in the Spirit are going to be psychological and not actually authentic.
Mary Rose, thank you for that question. Shall we do number 2?
Let's do number 2.
All right, this also comes...
There ain't no number 3.
All right. Mary Rose asks this. Mystics who claim to live without food for years. There are a few in the Catholic tradition, but there are also claims of Prahlad Jani, an Indian Hindu. Is it demonic or a hoax?
Well, again, I don't know that it should be. I don't think we're limited to those two options. As Mary Rose mentions, there are reports in Catholic tradition of people who are spiritual being able to live for extended periods of time, either completely without food and water, or at least without as much as should be expected to survive. And so there are instances of extraordinary fasting. Now, one of the names for this phenomenon is inedia. And you can hear how edia sounds like edible. And of course, in means not. Like if someone is inhospitable, it means they're not hospitable. So inedia means not eating. And this phenomenon is sometimes called inedia. The Indian mystic Prahlad Jani claimed to go for 2 weeks without eating anything or drinking anything, if I recall correctly. And he even would submit himself for testing sometimes. They had him in a hospital and were monitoring him over in India. But the tests were widely criticized by skeptics in India who pointed out a number of things. One is they kept some of the results confidential of the testing they did of him, because they would run blood tests and stuff. Also, they would do testing out of sight, and they would let him out of his room so he wasn't constantly being monitored on camera. They would let him go sunbathing. They would let him bathe. They would, without a camera on him, they would let him gargle, and there are ways he could get. Now, in terms of food, a 2-week fast, that's nothing. That's not going to kill you. Not for a person who has good health. You can easily go 2 weeks without food. It may not be comfortable the first few days, but you can do that. And I've had enough experience with intermittent fasting and done enough reading on intermittent fasting. 2 weeks without food, that's not a big deal. What's a little harder is 2 weeks without fluid, without water. But if they're letting you gargle and they're letting you bathe and they're letting you do other things off camera, you don't have actual proof that anything is happening here. This could easily be a hoax. And there have certainly been a lot of hoaxes in this area. There's an entire sect known as, they're kind of New Age sect, but they're known as the Breatharians. And they claim that you don't actually need to eat, that you can get all the nutrients you need just by breathing if you're spiritual enough. And what they have regularly found is that the breatharian leaders who are making these claims are secretly chowing down. So this technique, at least normally, does not work. And so I would say in a lot of these cases, it's simply a hoax. As to when it might be genuine, I would recommend a particular book. Back in the first half of the 20th century, there was a Catholic parapsychologist whose name was Father Herbert Thurston. He's one of several Catholic parapsychologists from the 20th century. And one of the books that he wrote is called The Physical Phenomena of Mysticism. And so if you look up The Physical Phenomena of Mysticism by Father Herbert Thurston, he has a whole chapter in it on inedia. And so you can read about what he has to say and get his evaluation of these various cases that are reported, for example, in the Christian tradition. As far as the idea that Mary Rose mentions of this being demonic, well, I couldn't rule out that a demon would do it, but I also have no evidence that a demon is involved in any of these cases. People should not simply assume that everything mysterious is due to demons, because it's not. There's lots of mysterious stuff that is not due to demons. And if you're doing a parapsychological investigation of a situation, natural phenomena are more common than preternatural phenomena. And so if you have a natural explanation for what has been observed, it is more likely than a preternatural explanation. And given the experience with breatharians and hoaxes and doing fasts within the normal tolerance of what the human body can handle, I would point to those natural explanations of, yeah, this fast isn't particularly impressive, or this is just a hoax, as being more likely in doubtful cases. I would need additional things in the case in order to be able to propose a demonic explanation, like the person is genuinely doing preternatural things and cannot bear to look at a crucifix, or cannot bear to have the Hail Mary said in their presence. So, aversions to holy items and actions is something that you would need in order to say, yeah, this is a demon, rather than this person is just good at fasting or they're cheating.
Mary Rose, thank you for a couple of very good questions, very appropriate for weird questions. I almost said Jimmy Akin's Weird World, but mixing things up. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin.
Pauline Dakin has the Weird World.
Oh, there is a thing called the Weird World? Oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, which is actually an episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
It's not Jimmy Akin's Weird World, but Pauline Dakin and the Weird World.
And the Weird World,
it's weird.
You gotta listen to the episode. It was at a certain point, it was one of my favorite episodes of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where I just went, what? We better take a break. Let's take a quick break, and we'll do more weird questions with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
What have you always wanted to know about the Vatican? Well, I'm your Vatican insider, and I answer that question when I bring you the news about the Pope, Vatican City, and I share insights and stories from a broad spectrum of church ministries.
Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis, Saturday night, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Theremin, right? That's the theremin. We asked for theremin. We got theremin. The composers of the music for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World gave us some theremin in there. Because if you're going to have no, not Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. I'm sorry. But if you're going to do weird questions, you need a theremin. I mean, that is the weird instrument. This one comes from Paul. This weird question comes from Paul. What is your opinion on the concept of limbo as the eternal home of the souls of unbaptized babies?
I'm skeptical of it. So the idea is that limbo was a theological speculation. It still is a theological speculation that's meant to answer the question of what would happen if a baby who has no personal sin, but who has not been baptized, were to die. And obviously that happened a lot in history when infant mortality was very high. And the reasoning was, well, you need to be baptized in order to have sanctifying grace, and you need sanctifying grace to be in spiritual union with God and go to heaven. So if these babies are not baptized, then they wouldn't have the grace needed to be with God, and they wouldn't go to heaven. On the other hand, they haven't committed any personal sins, so they shouldn't suffer. It's because they're not able at that age to commit personal sin, and certainly not mortal sin. So they shouldn't suffer in the afterlife either. And so the idea was proposed that they went to the fringe, and in Latin, fringe is limbus. They went to the limbus or fringe of hell, where they weren't in heaven, but they also really wouldn't be suffering. And they would just stay there for all eternity. And some, like St. Augustine, speculated maybe because they're on the fringe of hell, maybe they'll suffer a little bit, but only the lightest of sufferings. And later theologians said, they really shouldn't suffer at all. Mm-hmm. And maybe even they will have great natural happiness in limbo. They just won't have the supernatural happiness of being united with God and having the beatific vision. But you don't have to have the beatific vision to have a lot of natural happiness. I mean, go to an amusement park, ride a roller coaster, pick out on the weird food stands, have some, deep fried ice cream or deep fried chili poppers or something. You can have lots of fun without being in heaven. So maybe the children who went to this state would have lots of natural happiness, just not the full supernatural happiness of heaven. Well, so that's one possible way of explaining what would happen to these children. And for a time, it was the favored explanation, favored to the point that it became part of the common teaching of the church. So it wasn't simply a matter of theology. It was a kind of low-level doctrine, but not an infallible one. And with further doctrinal development, notably in the 20th century, although there are precedents prior to the 20th century for this, you will find individuals in prior centuries saying, I think God could do it another way too. By the time of the Second Vatican Council, the magisterium had reached a point where they said God gives everybody the opportunity for becoming associated with the saving grace of Christ, even if it's in a way that we can't perceive or understand in this life. In ways known to him, he does this. And if he does that for everybody, that's going to include unbaptized babies. And so by the time the Catechism of the Catholic Church came out in 1992, it said that we may entrust the salvation of these infants to God. We're not really told what happens to them, but we can prayerfully entrust them to God's care and hope that he has ways of salvation, of providing salvation for them, in which case they wouldn't need to go to limbo. And then in 2007, under Pope Benedict, an advisory body known as the International Theological Commission published a paper that the Vatican had commissioned them to write, called The Hope of Salvation for Infants Who Die Without Being Baptized. And Pope Benedict encouraged them to examine this subject and see, look and see, are there other ways besides limbo that this could work? And they looked at it and they concluded, yeah, there are. It could be that God counts and they weren't equally favorable on all of these options, but they said, and others have said, that the that, God might count the desire of the parents for the child's salvation as a kind of proxy baptism of desire, or the desire of the church for their salvation as a kind of proxy for baptism that would allow them to receive grace. And so the International Theological Commission concluded that that limbo is still a valid speculation as far as what happens, but it's only a speculation, and there are other good speculations as well. And personally, I tend to favor the other speculations. I think I'm quite skeptical of limbo. I think God can provide salvation for unbaptized children, just like He can provide salvation for other unbaptized people.
Paul, thank you very, very much. Appreciate that question. This one comes from Joshua. Joshua asks, if they were still around, which human relatives, Homo neanderthalis, Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, Homo denisova, etc., would we likely be able to baptize if they were so inclined to be received by Christ and His church?
Okay, so I guess I need to kind of partition this question. When Joshua says, if they were so inclined, I assume he's talking about the members of these other early human groups. And if they're so inclined, I would say baptize them.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
You got to volunteer for baptism. They want to be baptized, baptize them. That the fact that they're able to request the baptism, understanding what it means, indicates to me that they are a suitable candidate for baptism. So if they know about, okay, there's God, His Son Jesus Christ, there's an afterlife, you want to be with Him in heaven, in the afterlife, they got all that conceptual package, and they say, sign me up. Well, then sign them up, baptize them. You don't really need to worry about it beyond that. However, if we're asking the question in the abstract, which are most likely to be able to benefit from baptism, then I'd need to approach the question differently and say, well, what evidence do we have concerning them? Because a standard principle that I use is, if someone has the concept of God, or if they have the concept of the afterlife, then that's a good sign that they have a soul that will survive into the afterlife. Now, I've actually done more research on this. The common theological opinion, this is not church teaching, but the common theological opinion is that you need a rational soul in order to survive death. And rational meaning human level reason. Well, okay, that's based on philosophical arguments. And I actually did an episode of Mysterious World where I reviewed those philosophical arguments. It's episode 203, so people could find it by going to mysterious.fm/203 if they want. But I look at those arguments, and I don't think they're conclusive at all. I don't think they're persuasive. And we've got some evidence that animals may survive into the afterlife, including empirical evidence that they may survive into the afterlife, or at least that some of them may. And if you want to hear about that, go listen to episode 203 of Mysterious World, because I don't want to take time away from our question here. So of these, assuming you need a rational soul to experience the afterlife, which of these most likely have that? Well, the one that would most likely not have it is Homo erectus. Homo erectus means upright man, because he walked upright. That's the oldest of these groups. And so if any of them lacked a rational soul, it would be Homo erectus. When it comes to Homo neanderthalensis, I would say that based on current archaeological findings, they are extremely likely to have rational souls. We have evidence that they not only buried their dead, and that's a noteworthy sign, but it's not proof to my mind of them having the concept of the afterlife, because dead bodies stink. It's like Martha said at Lazarus's tomb, "Lord, behold, it's the fourth day. He stinketh." I mean,
she said stinketh, huh?
Well,
that was
yeah,
very King James of her.
Yeah, yeah. And so you could bury the dead simply for hygienic reasons. Like cats bury their own poop, not because they have any philosophical ideas about it, just because they have a disgust reaction and a reflex to bury it. So Neanderthals and others could have buried their dead without the concept of the afterlife, but it looks like Neanderthals also put in grave goods. Grave goods are items that you bury with the dead, and there may be a literal belief that the dead will use this item in the afterlife, or it may just kind of be a symbolic gesture of, so-and-so really loved this thing, and so I want them to have it in the afterlife, even if this is just a symbol and they're not really going to use it. Although sometimes they did literally believe it. In Egypt, for example, they would bury, the reason that they would bury stuff with you was so that you could use it in the afterlife. They would put food and oils and stuff like that in tombs so that the mummies, when they wake up in their version of the resurrection, they can use this stuff. But in other cases, it's just a symbolic gesture of my child died and this was my child's favorite toy, and so I'm going to bury the toy with the child as a grave good so that symbolically, at least, the child will have the toy that they really liked in the afterlife. Well, it looks like Neanderthals buried grave goods, and that suggests they had, whether they interpreted the use of the grave good literally or non-literally, that suggests they had the concept of the afterlife. And if you've got the concept of the afterlife, I think you've got an afterlife for sure. When it comes to Homo floresiensis, so they're very recently discovered, and we only have a few instances. They're found in the Dutch East Indies, or the East Indies. And they're the Hobbit race. They're shorter in stature. They're kind of like pygmies. But we have very little of their culture, and I don't know that we found grave goods for them. Same thing with the Denisovans. They were from, they kind of lived in the modern Russian Federation. And we only have a few instances of them. They're also recently discovered. They're not as well studied as Neanderthals. I think the evidence would point to the Neanderthals definitely having an afterlife, and I would suspect that the others do too. So since we're taking the question of are they inclined to be baptized out of it, if someone gave me a Neanderthal baby or a Homo floresiensis baby or a Homo denisovan baby or a Homo erectus baby, my inclination would be to baptize all of them and said, here, you can raise this. My inclination would be to baptize all of them conditionally and then do my best to raise them in the Catholic faith.
Very, very interesting. Joshua, I'm so glad you asked the question. But I have to ask you, Jimmy, because I don't understand this. I don't understand how Neanderthalensis is a different species from us, because we clearly could
breed with them.
And
we did.
Yeah,
so we had really attractive ancestors, and other groups wanted to breed with them, and they did.
So how are they a different species?
Well, so the term species is somewhat flexible in biology. It can be used for two different populations that cannot breed with each other and produce fertile offspring. But the problem is there are exceptions. Like, we don't consider horses and donkeys the same species, but they can interbreed to an extent. Similarly, lions and tigers, we'd consider them different, but they can interbreed to a certain extent. So there's some flexibility about exactly what counts as the same species. It's fair to say that these relatives of ours that belong to Homo are human because they belong to Homo, but they may be a different subspecies than we are.
I love Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. I love the music. I'm glad we did it. Jimmy, thanks very much for another great hour.
My pleasure.
And that'll do it for us. I want to remind you that the fall sale is on over at shop.catholic.com. Every single thing on sale, some of it at astonishingly low prices. Shop.catholic.com. We'll see you on Catholic Answers Live.